Today's show is sponsored by Okta. In these challenging times, we're all looking for simplicity, something that just works. The last thing you want to do is spend time building authentication for your new curbside pickup app. Because if you're spending time building your own authentication systems, it's time spent not making your customers happy. This is where Okta makes it simple. Okta's cloud-based authentication services are easy to set up, and they already integrate with the tools and applications you use today. Okta is trusted by companies like HPE, Splunk, CarMax, GitLab, and Cengage, plus many, many more. To take the hassle out of your authentication needs, visit okta.com/cloud and learn how to get started today. That's okta.com/cloud.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Dell and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. It is getting into the later part of January 2021, and we continue to move along through the year. A couple of interesting notes here in Cloud News of the Week, but before we get to that, I want to highlight one thing. As you may have noticed, Aaron and I launched a new podcast series called Cloudcast Basics. Hopefully you did get a chance to listen to sort of the first introductory episode that we did, dropped out in the feed a couple of weeks ago. But if you get a chance and you have some friends who are new to cloud computing, are trying to learn this, they want a simplified version of it, please have them go over there, subscribe to the channel. It's now on pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere else. But give that a listen. Give your friends a heads up that maybe they should subscribe to that. We'd love to grow the Cloudcast community and especially bring some new people along that are new to cloud computing or new to some domain of cloud computing. We will have a new series, season 1, started with season 0, but season 1 will be out, should be out before the end of January, and we're excited. Aaron and I are working on that right now. We're excited to get that out. So let's jump right into Cloud News of the Week. A couple of big announcements this last week. The first was that VMware is going to be looking for a new CEO as Pat Gelsinger is stepping down from the CEO position at VMware and going back to Intel. So Pat Gelsinger, who has legendarily been at Intel for 30 plus years, was part of the x86 team and many things over there. Had left Intel after a long career. It was at EMC and then eventually became the CEO at VMware. Going back to Intel for a huge amount of money, apparently $116 or $120 million package over some number of years, 3 years, 4-year contract initially. So huge, I guess you would call sort of free agent signing. Intel obviously has a big challenge on its hands these days, especially with ARM becoming more and more dominant on the desktop, with Apple becoming dominant in mobile as it's been for a long time, and more and more becoming dominant as we're seeing the cloud providers, building their own chipsets, or building on top of ARM chipsets, things like AWS Graviton and some other things. So Pat's going to have a lot of work to do over at Intel to bring them back to their once glory days. Obviously, he understands that culture really well, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Looking back at his tenure at VMware, obviously went through some various ups and down stages. Took over from Paul Maritz, kind of got them away from a lot of the non-virtualization, non-infrastructure things that Paul had tried to get VMware into. Pat really tried to focus back on sort of software-defined data center. Made the acquisition of Nicira, so really kicked off the software-defined networking space. Was a big part of what became the HCI market with things like vSAN and some other platforms. And then I think he really, probably maybe the biggest thing that I'll think about from a cloud perspective was, they had a fairly big failure in terms of their rollout of vCloud Air. VMware trying to initially roll out their own cloud platform. But they eventually sort of turned the corner. Very difficult for a company to sort of admit mistakes, but they turned the corner. Big partnership with AWS. So VMware on AWS is doing, by all accounts, very, very well. And we continue to see VMware expand that out into other cloud platforms as well. So, Pat will have I think, generally very positive legacy. They did go through, one downtime, one difficult time when there was some talk about Dell doing various things with the acquisition, but Pat weathered through that and has done very, very well for his tenure, roughly 8 to 10 years, I believe. So, but will be interesting to watch what Pat does over at Intel now. So, the new generation of not only who will be the CEO at VMware, but to see what Pat can do to turn around Intel. So, we wish him best of luck. The other news was Cockroach Labs scored a $160 million round of funding at a new roughly $2 billion valuation. So Cockroach Labs, really the one database that is really designed for multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. So a lot of positive reviews that we hear around CockroachDB, really a highly available multi-cloud database. So congratulations to them on that new round of funding. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We are going to do, this is the third of four look aheads for 2021. This one, we're going to look at what it means to be a cloud first and really a cloud only company with old-time friend of the show, Jeremy Burton. So really excited to get into that right after the break.
Today's show is sponsored by BMC. And BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? The A game is when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/agame. That's bmc.com/agame. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform for cloud scale infrastructure and applications. Datadog provides dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform so you can get end-to-end visibility quickly. Be proactive with your monitoring strategy and catch issues before your clients are impacted. Start managing the overall health of your environment with a free Datadog trial. Go to datadog.com/cloudcast for the free trial. That's datadog.com/cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, we're going to continue on the looking ahead shows that we've been doing here in January. We've been getting a lot of really good feedback from folks. They like that we're looking at some pretty big topics, some pretty big ideas that a lot of you are thinking about are part of your day-to-day here in 2021 and kind of how they'll evolve. So one of the things that, Aaron and I have talked about quite a bit on at least the last year of shows is really, we're seeing this big trend, lots of data points at this point of, companies that are really adopting kind of a cloud first and in some cases a cloud only model and what that really means. What do the changes look like in terms of, how you interact with the market, what the technologies look like. And we thought, let's bring on some folks that have really kind of dealt with this and have experience on both sides of it. So great to have back friend of the show, one of my former bosses, Jeremy Burton, CEO of Observe. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be back on. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So you and I have known each other for a long time. I was lucky enough to work for you when you were CMO at EMC and so forth. I got to do some very cool projects. But for folks that may not know either about what you've done in the past, because you've worked in running product groups, leadership groups, marketing groups, or what you're doing today at Observe, give us a little bit of kind of the background and then ultimately kind of what's taken you to these cloud-only companies.
Yeah, well, as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm not from the Midwest. So I originally from England. I was a rare breed of programmer in England when I left college, and you couldn't really make any money as a programmer in England. And so I ended up going into, believe it or not, technical support at Oracle and ultimately moving to the US. Which was a big eye opener for me. I mean, I worked for this guy called Mark Benioff, who's done pretty well since. I'd love to say it was all down to me, but it wasn't. Look, I was in product management. I ran development teams. As was popular back in the day, a lot of people came out of engineering and went into marketing at Oracle, and so I did that. And because I'd seen sort of the development and then the marketing and sales side of things, for me, it was always natural to then want to go run a business. So I did a bit of that at Veritas and Symantec, and then more recently at EMC. And I've never fully been able to get away from marketing. I've always found myself going back to it because I love it so much. But I've always been on the product side of things. So I'd probably call myself more a product marketer than someone like a field marketer or a brand marketer or something like that. And And in the last few years, I feel very fortunate to have been a part of the Snowflake story. I've been on the Snowflake board for the past 5 years. And that's what really got me thinking about, like, man, the thing that's important in the world is data. And just like when I was at Oracle, 20 years ago, the sort of first act of the database companies is sort of selling licenses for existing workloads. And then it tends to be that the second act is an ecosystem of partners. Now, back in the Oracle days, that was the SAPs and PeopleSofts and Siebels. But I felt like, now the focus is not on sort of human-generated transactional data, but on machine data. That would be a big deal. And so when Observe came along, as essentially a company that was going to analyze machine data and use Snowflake as the repository or the query engine for that, it just seemed like the right move. It seemed like we were going to be working on something that was going to get bigger and bigger in future. So, yeah, I almost feel like it's come a full circle. Snowflake really is just a reinvention of Oracle for the cloud, and now we're, Observe, we're building an application on top of Snowflake.
Right. Yeah, it's and Snowflake was interesting. I first got introduced to it, just talking to companies, out at various events, and they have this sort of like Apple-like passion. Their customers are just like, it just works. It scales. I don't have to know anything about it. It's in the cloud. I throw as much as I can, and you go, okay, that's incredibly powerful. They figured out some amazing magic behind the scenes to make that work. And I want you to kind of, because I'm not going to be able to tell the Observe story very well, but when I heard that you guys basically said, hey, look, we were trying to solve certain problems of like data capture, data storage as part of what you do. And then you just said, your engineers at some point said, we're just going to build on top of, sort of stand on the shoulder of those folks. It rung out to me as this, like, okay, this is this next generation of what cloud first companies are doing, is they're not reinventing the wheel when they don't have to, right? Like if something already exists, they don't have to. Give us just a real high level, because we're going to dive into Observe at some point later in the year. But like, what is the unique thing that Observe is trying to bring around this whole idea of monitoring, log metrics, collection, all those types of things?
Yeah, really a couple of things. I mean, so Observe, the market that we aspire to win in is observability. It's a new market, but it's also really it's a collapsing of three markets. I think log analytics, metrics monitoring, and APM, I believe, will all be supplanted by this new market for observability. And the reason why is quite simply that the number one job in America right now is writing software, and the number two job is fixing it. And so you think, well, how can that be? And applications that they're way more complex, I think, than they ever used to be, and they're ephemeral and they change over time, and so it's really, really hard to figure out what happened when something goes wrong. And our sense was that all of the tools in the market to date, they sort of like give you a narrow view of the problem. It's sort of like looking at something out of one eye. And so if you could give people sort of full peripheral vision of the problem, then maybe we could solve these problems a whole lot more quickly. And it's all a matter of data. So, ingesting massive volumes of data and providing an abstraction above that data so that users can quickly navigate it is really what Observe is all about. And as I said earlier, we use Snowflake as the database because, candidly, we wanted to have all of our engineering time working on pain points for the customer, not going and writing a database, which I think a lot of people have done in the past.
Yeah, no, it's a smart way of thinking about it. Takes a lot of guts though to take that approach. What I was hoping to do today is I want to tap a little bit into your past. I want to do a little bit of before and after. I mentioned we want to look at this sort of cloud first approach. You've been on now both sides of the fence, right? You worked with companies who sold both hardware and software in the very traditional way of big sales forces. In some cases, it actually came in a box. In other cases, it came in hardware. You're now in this world where everything's on demand. Give us the high level sort of differences from an executive level of what are the important things that used to take up your time then versus take up your time now?
Yeah, so some of it is definitely sort of cloud first versus on premises, and some of it is just startup versus big company. Yeah. But there are some very, very liberating things. For example, having all of your engineers work on the latest release all the time. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really, really is. You don't have like many versions out, with your customers. You've got one, and so everybody's sort of like present in that latest release, and so you've really got like one axis of reasoning there, and you can get very, very close to your customers because it's an online service. You can see who's using the product and for how long and what they're doing, like all the time.
Right.
And that can be very humbling. I mean, certainly, we get feedback, the traditional route from some of our sales engineers, but we can actually go into the product and we can see what people have been doing and not doing and what they've been struggling to find, or the feature that we thought was great, how they're struggling to use it. And I think what's particularly important very early in a product lifecycle is that brutal, like honest feedback direct from the customer. You don't want anything to get in the way. Other things I'd say, look, the continuous integration and delivery. We do a planning meeting on a Monday. We sort of assign, in some cases, or allocate work or have a chat around what folks are working on. And then Friday we do a demo meeting and we show progress in the week. And the idea that, you can, work on something starting Monday and then Friday you can wrap it up in a release, which, maybe a week later will be promoted into prod. That's exciting. It's I think engineers love building things, and to get this almost instant gratification of what you've built out in front of the customer, given feedback is very motivating. And I think like changing priorities, certainly early stage startup, you often don't know really what the customer wants or the right way forward. And so you've got to be able to react. And when the business is small and you've got full visibility into the customers and what they're doing with the product, making these priority changes, you can do it very, very quickly. So, those would be the big things, I think, building the product. And then, like on the business model side of things, every company that I've been at prior to Observe, pretty much, you're encumbered by a business model and a pricing model that was designed, often years or in some cases decades ago. So you spend your time fixing other people's problems, whereas, with a new company and a new product, you can say, well, okay, what would make sense for the customer, and how do we set up a business model and a pricing model for today versus what it would have been good, 10 years ago. And again, that's sort of very liberating, right? You've really got an opportunity to set the company up for success based on what the customer wants versus what the last head of sales wanted. Right.
Yeah, no, a lot there. I'm curious on the product side of things. Older companies, matured companies, you get into these sort of long roadmap life cycles, right? Like something could take 18 months. In a lot of cases, you're having to say yes to all these different features from different people, but not everybody's using them all. Like, how do you guys think about even things like roadmaps, right? Like you said, you're going to get certain things from customers directly. You can look at certain patterns that people have, but how much do you find yourself going, yep, we've got to add things versus no, like we're going to have to say no to certain things just because it doesn't fit a cloud model. Like, the people who say like, hey, we want you to, maintain this software for 4 years. You're like, can't do that. Right. Like, how much of that do you see?
Yeah, we've got to be very, very focused. And in fact, I think early on, the secret, or one of the secrets to success, is probably saying no more than you're saying yes. So we tried to keep roadmaps very short. Yeah. We tried to have 2 or 3 big features, or epics, as we'd call them. We try to really not let that work, or the roadmap, really go out more than a couple of quarters at most. And that enables us to do a couple of things. One, very clearly communicate to everybody on the team what's important, and have the sort of small resource that we do have focused on the things that really matter the most.
Right.
And it also sort of prevents the feature creep, meaning, every engineer and every product manager has got a great idea for a new thing we could add to the product, but does the customer want it? And right now, our mindset is, look, and unless it comes from the customer, it's not going on the roadmap. I mean, we sort of knew the macro features that we were missing when we went into the beta phase. We knew we needed alerting, for example, and we knew we needed metrics. But there's all manner of other features we could have added, but we're like, no, we're going to do these two, and then we're going to get the feedback from the customers to get the scope and performance and quality right, and then let's ask our customers where we go next. So, for me, roadmaps, there's very little upside to having big, long, laborious roadmaps, and I think sort of zeroing in on what your target customer is and what's important to them. I mean, it is a bit of a cliche, listen to your customers, but I can't overstate how important it is. And I think in a smaller company or in a cloud first company, you have an opportunity to get much closer to them.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. It's, in kind of maybe mature companies, you're like you said, you're held by a sales model. You've got go-to-market things that sort of are independent of your customers. You guys are still very much in that stage where the problems they're trying to solve, which is like, I want to serve my business. I want to conserve capital. I want to, like, you guys are in sort of the exact same mode. And I get a sense you probably can empathize with, the way that you have to make trade-offs or the same way they have to make trade-offs. You don't want to build features that, you don't want to maintain the same sort of thing. Like, I feel like at this stage, there's probably a certain amount of sort of simpatico that you have with the types of people that are coming to you.
Yeah, and in fact, we when we sort of chose which segment of the market we were going after first, we thought 3,000 to 4,000 SaaS companies in North America was the target market, and one of the things that makes it a little bit easier for us is obviously a lot of the pain points they feel as a business are the pain points we feel.
Right. And
so it's very easy. I always feel like it's easier to sell something or tell a story about something if you've experienced it, yourself. We find when we go to those companies, obviously the focus on the customer is important, and what's your customer doing, and is your customer having a bad experience, and they're all of the things that we can help them out with. But yeah, I mean, we've got to be. I'm sure we can make money selling to Fortune 500 companies. The problem is the roadmap would get out of control. We'd fail.
Right.
And so you've got to make those brutal decisions. Sometimes it's to say no to a feature or two. Sometimes it's just to say no to a segment of the market. And often in the bigger companies, you don't get that opportunity because you're sort of everywhere. And so it rains requests,
Yeah. You highlighted you've got some background in marketing at the beginning. I would argue you're probably one of the best storytellers in tech that I've ever worked with. Getting your message out these days is different, right? Like, it's no longer, hey, come to my website, or, my sales rep comes out with a PowerPoint. Like, how do you find, when your message is on Hacker News and it's, in GitHub and it's in all these different places? Like, how do you tell a story? How do you get the message out when it's so distributed, or people are coming to you before you're going out to them?
Yeah, I think this world is changing dramatically, and I'm actually pretty excited about seeing how it shapes up, because I'm a firm believer that marketing is going to be about producing great content, like high quality. Certainly in our case, it's a technical sales, a high quality technical content, and maybe product marketing in the traditional sense. And it sort of pains me to say it a bit because I've been in product marketing roles in the past. I think it's dying.
Yeah.
And the reason is it's no longer authentic. It's not, the content isn't deep enough. The buyers are educated. And so I think our vision for this at Observe, what we want to do is we want to produce high quality technical content for practitioners in the realm of observability. I actually think the model is that you want almost a newsroom style setup, whereby you've got domain experts, both in-house and freelance, that can write content. And some of it maybe will be more Observe biased. We'll use Observe as examples of how to solve problems. And some of it will be industry. But I firmly believe that if you can produce high quality technical content, and you can use sort of digital marketing techniques to push it out to the communities where that content is consumed, then you can help educate the buyer, establish credibility, and earn the right to sell.
Yeah.
So I think that the world is, kind of slowly but surely becoming inverted. And I think organizations have got to adapt. And I mean, this is one of the exciting things about being in a small company. We a month ago, we had nobody in marketing, like 0 people in marketing. And so then you get a chance to think, well, how do we want to set this up? Do we want to do it the way every other company's done it? Or do we just go all digital? And do we produce almost like a newsroom or news website where we've got domain experts and we think of it content first and then content distribution second, versus sales materials and PowerPoints and PDFs and value propositions to support the sales force. And I'm a big believer that the former is going to be more important than the latter.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, and it makes sense. It's everything we do these days. We consume in HD. We binge watch it. Schedules don't matter. We do it whenever it's on our own thing. It's got to be easy to share. And yeah, if you force your prospective customers to then go, oh no, you've got to look at a PDF. You've got to sign up for something. You're going to have to look at a PowerPoint. It's like nothing of this feels natural. Like it's not the way I want to do. It's like you said, it's that lack of inauthenticity, but it's also just I don't want to do business with companies that do stuff like that.
Right. You feel like you don't trust it, right? I mean, I think it's topical right now because trust on the internet is man, that is hard to. How do you establish trust online? And I think if you want to be credible enough to sell something, you have to establish that you're a trustworthy source for information, in our case, around observability, which means it can't just be we're great and everyone else sucks. It's got to be educational. It's got, hey, let me tell you about the space of observability and the different approaches to it. And now let me tell you about Observe's approach. And I think if you're balanced with it, as I said, you then earn the right to sell. But it's I think it's a fascinating challenge for the next 5 or 10 years.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's do you know what you're talking about first, and then do you do something valuable second? And people don't always get that order right. I'm curious. So, when people have done traditional IT or even traditional IT orgs tended to be centralized, we've seen that kind of blow up over the last decade, where lines of business make their own decisions. Product managers are, as technical as their whole engineering teams. Like, how do you find? I know you're, like you said, you're kind of targeting SaaS companies, but like, is your user, your buyer, your influencer distributed within companies? Are they somewhat centralized in that line of business? Like, what's the engagement from more of a cloud first perspective than a traditional IT perspective?
We tend to go to. It's actually fascinating right now because you sort of got the companies that are, a sort of cloud first, DevOps, and I'd say very kind of centralized, doing DevOps properly, the way God intended it to be done. And then you've got folks who are cloud first, that are still, IT operations, engineering, and things been thrown over the wall. Just the people in those roles have got different titles. So there's a little bit of everything out there, if I'm honest. I would say more often than not, though, in the SaaS companies, really our buyer tends to be somewhat technical. The buyer will be like a head of DevOps or an SRE team or a sort of mid to senior level engineering manager. They often won't be the person who uses the product, but often in the smaller companies, they'll sort of manage the team and they'll be hands-on. And I think the big difference, what I see from companies I've worked in the past is everyone in the past would sort of strive to do a big deal, right? I even remember, Oracle in the late 90s and the dot-com rush, right? Everybody wanted to do $1 million deal, or, if this dot-com's going down, they're doing it holding $5 million worth of Oracle licenses. And that world's, it's over, The model is show some value, do a deal for $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, and then that initial purchase prove out, the value in the business that you showed in the POC, and then have the customer come back and buy more. And if they like the product, they will, and if they don't, they won't. So I feel like the days where you could walk into organizations and do initial deals for hundreds of thousands of dollars, those days are fewer and further between. The nice thing is you don't have to go to some big central group to secure that budget. You can tap into, one of the smaller teams and there'll be a purchase for, I don't know, thousands of dollars. And as I said, once they use the product, if they like it, they'll come back for more. And again, one of the advantages I think of been in a newer company is, we can set up a pricing model that makes sense to them. We can make it usage based. So buy a little bit now, and if you like it, come back and buy some more. Yeah. And that's sort of how the customer likes it.
Yeah, it's sort of dawning on me now. You've been saying it 3 or 4 times. 3,000 to 4,000 SaaS companies in North America. I think about sort of my day-to-day work, and maybe I interact with 6 or 8 or 10 of them, right? So maybe it's a Google service, or it's Office 365 or Salesforce. I think that in and of itself sort of it lets us know that so much of what people do these days, whether it was a productivity thing or just your electrician who comes out to do some work, like so much of what we do is moving to the cloud, whether we sort of recognize it, or not. I'm going to sort of wrap up and ask you one last question. So, as we talked a little about product, we talked about marketing and go to market. What are, whether it's what you saw on the Snowflake board or what you've seen so far, like what are the 2 or 3 sort of biggest learnings you found just about this sort of cloud first mentality, cloud first go to market that, big learnings so far?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think first it's very liberating. There's just a lot of the stack you don't need to worry about. Yeah. I mean, it almost seems ridiculous now to think about building a data center. Well, yeah, we don't have one of those. And by the way, the application platform, we've got that. And by the way, the database, we've got that. And so it's like, hey, every developer that we hire can work on the application, which is the way you'd want it, right? Because that's really what the customer's paying for. So to me, that's liberating. All engineers worked on the application, all on the latest release. Like, awesome. And if you do that, you can go fast, And the second thing I'd say, you can really get close to your customers. I remember over the years always struggling. Well, what does the customer think? What's the feedback? And we do customer advisory councils, which always felt very staged and people being polite. And it was the same people who came back, and then they became friends, and then they didn't want to give honest feedback. But I think in this online or cloud first world, I mean, you see the whites of your customers' eyes every day, right? Right. And you can see if things are going wrong. You see it.
They're there or they're not there. It could be like
right. If your average session time is declining and your churn's increasing, and you can see the issues that folks are having with your app, there's no running away from that. So it can be very exacting, but being close to your customers, that to me is really one of the big ones. And then, I mean, the flip side of that also this move to sort of agile microservices, CI/CD, there's an opportunity to be responsive, right? It's scary when the avalanche of feedback comes in or what you see, but the architecture and the development process, it's set up for you to respond quickly. So yeah, those are probably the big things, and all things which I maybe knew a bit about before I came to observe, but it's different knowing about it versus experiencing it. It is a very different world.
Do you I'll give you one last question. Do you find, so when we were doing things that were storage centric, I mean, you had to know protocols and kind of you had to sort of have your bona fides as a technical person. Do you find that you have to be more of a business facing person, because again, this stuff tends to affect people's bottom line. It affects the services they sell. Like, is it a different mix of sort of the business part of your brain and the technical part of your brain that you have to invoke every single day?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's sort of probably in equal measure. The sort of what we're building, which is fundamentally important, and the product is the most important thing. But at the same time, like the business model behind it and how we're going to charge for it and how we can sustain that, and then how the roadmap shapes up based on the feedback. I mean, that is all a part of making the product better. And we actually use salespeople at Observe to get feedback from customers, because you get that unfettered feedback. Product managers will tend to listen with happy ears. They'll, they can turn a statement from the customer saying the product was terrible into, well, they actually kind of like the product, but this bit was terrible. And but with the sales guys, you don't get any of that filter. And I always feel like my job as running the company is to try and make sure that feedback does come unfettered and it makes its way into the roadmap, and that the engineering team, they don't just begrudgingly put it in the roadmap. They're like, this is awesome. We're finding out firsthand what our customers are doing. And if you can get that loop going, that's the magic right there.
Right. Well, listen, Jeremy, as always, it's great to catch up with you. We appreciate the time and the insight. What's the best place for folks to go if they're listening to this and they go, hey, we're looking for observability. We have problems in this space. What's the best place to engage with your team?
Yeah, check us out at observeinc.com. And we're also on Twitter these days as well, at observeinc, and probably LinkedIn as well, under the same handle. Oh, and if you want to check out the launch, it's on YouTube, and we put a playlist together, our launch. Just again, search for Observe Inc.
Yeah, good stuff. We'll get that in the show notes. Folks, as always, we said, we wanted to kind of dig into some broader topics. We cover observability, but, we wanted to kind of get the business behind this. So thankful to Jeremy for his time today, his insights. For both Aaron and I, we appreciate everybody listening today. We thank you for telling a friend, for helping us grow the community. And with that, we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.